The Resolute Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zaltherian Nebula, its hull still humming from the fold. On the bridge, Captain Darian Voss leaned forward in his command chair, arms folded, eyes scanning the viewscreen like a man who had seen too many dramatic first contacts to be impressed by another one. Behind him, his six-person diplomatic plus crew unit was arranged in a loose cluster, already arguing. "That's their flagship," said Jo, the ship's xenolinguist, pressing her nose against the observation glass. She was barely 26, but she had already decoded 4 previously unknown languages, and she had the audacity to find everything delightful. "It's enormous. Look at those spines." "Decorative," said Me, the mission's structural engineer. He had enormous hands and an unhurried voice that made everything sound like settled fact. "The energy output doesn't support weapons on those extensions. It's intimidation architecture. Same thing humans did with castle towers." "We stopped doing that," said New York, the team's biologist and unofficial morale officer. She was braiding her hair at her station, which Captain Voss had long since stopped trying to discourage. "Only because guns made walls pointless," said Me. "Silence on deck," said Voss, but without heat. His crew had earned the right to think out loud. The communication array lit up. A translator drone chirped once, signal acquired, and then the screen filled with the face of Emperor Zalor of the Galactic Dominion of Sovereign Worlds, Eternal Flame of the 12-star clusters, and approximately 40 other titles that the translation buffer helpfully abbreviated. Zalor was tall even in projection, robed in deep violet, with elongated facial crests that fanned outward in what the xenodiplomacy briefings identified as a dominance display. His eyes were the color of an incoming storm. His voice, when he spoke, resonated at a frequency that made the deck plates vibrate faintly. "Small vessel," he began. "You have entered the sovereign boundary of the Galactic Dominion. You will identify your species, your homeworld, and the name of the authority who dared to send you here. Speak quickly. My patience is not a renewable resource." There was a pause on the Resolute Dawn. Then Day, the mission's tactical analyst, said very quietly, "Not into the mic," he said dared. He actually said dared. And Hi, the ship's pilot and resident historian, whispered back, "I clocked at least 3 implied threats in that opener. I'm calling it a personal record." The youngest crew member, a communications technician of 22 who had never left Earth's solar system before this mission, simply stared at the Emperor's crested visage and said, "His hat is alive. His hat is moving." It was true. The Emperor's crest was slowly spreading wider as he waited, a biological signal of expanding authority. In the briefings, this had been described as deeply intimidating. Jo made a sound that was very clearly the beginning of a suppressed laugh. Voss closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them, uncrossed his arms, and spoke into the comlink with the calm of a man ordering coffee. "Emperor Zalor. I'm Captain Darian Voss of the Earth Interstellar Expedition, operating under the United Nations Space Charter. Our homeworld is the 3rd planet of a yellow dwarf star in what you'd call the Western Fringe. As for who dared send us," he paused, and something in his expression shifted to the particular look humans get when they find a situation privately hilarious but are trying to be polite about it. "That would be a committee of about 800 elected representatives and a handful of agency directors." It was a fairly normal Tuesday. Zalor's crest froze mid-spread. "At a committee," he repeated. "A large one," Voss confirmed. There were subcommittees. Behind him, Me had turned to face the wall. His shoulders were moving. Emperor Zalor studied the human captain for a long moment. In his 40 years of ruling the Dominion, he had accepted the surrender of 17 civilizations, absorbed 6 others diplomatically, and reduced 2 to cautionary historical footnotes. None of them had mentioned subcommittees. "You speak of your governing body," Zalor said slowly, "as if it is unremarkable." "It's deeply remarkable in its own way," said New York, who had apparently forgotten she was not supposed to speak yet. "But yes. We make a lot of decisions by committee. There's usually a vote. Sometimes a filibuster. Last year someone talked for 11 hours straight to delay a budget resolution. 11 hours, said Zalor. She brought snacks, said Day helpfully. The Emperor's crest, which had begun to fan outward again in a renewed attempt at intimidation, slowly, almost sadly, began to retract. You are here, Zalor said, pivoting, because your kind has twice violated Dominion boundary protocols. 2 of your vessels entered restricted space without authorization. The first offense was overlooked. The second was not. He leaned forward. This is your species' final opportunity to submit a formal apology and withdraw all presence from this region. Failure to comply will result in the full military weight of the Dominion being brought to bear upon your homeworld. He let that land. On the Resolute Dawn, a silence followed. Then Joe said, "Can I ask what was in that restricted space?" Zalor blinked. "I beg your." "The restricted area. The zone our ships wandered into twice." "What's there?" "Because our records show that region is empty. No marked hazard, no listed sovereign claim, no beacon signal. Our ships weren't ignoring a boundary, they genuinely didn't see one. The Dominion does not mark its boundaries for the benefit of lesser." "So," said High, slowly, as if working through a logic problem, "you restricted the space, didn't tell anyone, and now you're threatening a planet because people flew through an invisible line?" There was another pause. Said Wa, "That's actually the whole situation, isn't it?" It was me who finally turned back around. His face was composed with the precision of a man who had spent considerable effort on it. "Emperor Zalor," he said, in the reasonable tone of someone explaining load-bearing walls to a client, "with respect, on our world, if you put up a fence, you're generally required to put up a sign." "I'm not saying you're wrong," said New York. "Clearly your sovereignty over the region is a real and serious thing. I just think there may have been a communication failure. Which, honestly, happens." She gestured expansively. "Have you met subcommittees?" The Emperor of the Galactic Dominion of Sovereign Worlds stared at the crew of the Resolute Dawn. He had prepared for defiance. He had prepared for pleading. He had prepared for the specific type of trembling submission that most species arrived at within approximately 40 seconds of seeing his flagship's weapon arrays come online. He had not prepared for this. "You," he said, "are not afraid." Captain Voss tilted his head. "I wouldn't say that. I'm sure your weapons are impressive. But being afraid of them doesn't really help me solve the problem, does it?" He spread his hands. "You want an acknowledgement that our ships crossed into your space. You want some guarantee it won't happen again. Those are reasonable things to want. We can talk about that. But threatening our planet isn't a negotiation, it's a demand. And when someone leads with a demand, the conversation gets longer, not shorter." Zalor's crest had gone fully still. This, in Zaltherian physiology, indicated genuine uncertainty, a state the Emperor had not experienced in a very long time. "What," he said, "finally, do you propose?" "A map," said Voss. "Marked boundaries. Proper beacon placement. A protocol for vessels that cross accidentally versus intentionally. And maybe a formal channel so that next time, you contact us before we have to send someone across the galaxy to sort it out." He paused. "Also, I'd love to know what's actually in that restricted zone. Purely out of curiosity." "It is a sacred site," Zalor said, and something shifted in his voice. Smaller. More honest. "A memorial. To the founders of the Dominion." "Oh," said Joe, and her voice was immediately entirely different, soft and genuine. "We didn't know that. I'm sorry our ships went through it. And somehow, that was what did it. Not the logic. Not the argument about fences and signs. Just a young human xenolinguist saying I'm sorry like she meant it, about a place she hadn't even known existed." Zalor was quiet for a long moment. "Your species," he said at last, "is very strange. We really are, agreed Captain Darian Voss. But we're useful at tables. We've had a lot of practice. The Emperor of 12 Star Clusters looked at the crew of the Resolute Dawn, at Joe with her notebook already open, at me calculating structural tolerances on a tablet, at New York who had resumed braiding her hair, at Day and High whispering about filibuster records, at Young was still staring at the Emperor's crest with pure, unbothered fascination. And somewhere beneath 40 years of empire and authority and the expectation of terror, Zalor felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt, against all reason, like maybe this meeting was going to be interesting. "Send me your cartographers," he said. Voss smiled. Already writing the memo. And that was how humanity's first formal contact with the Galactic Dominion ended, not in war, not in surrender, but in a boundary survey, a shared map, and a committee. There were, inevitably, subcommittees.